Hello, everyone, and welcome to Book 1, Chapter 5, Painting. This is the 40K Parley podcast. I am Lord Red Dog, and today, we're going to talk about painting. There's just so much to go over. So, as usual, I think it's best, let's just jump into it. Yeah, let's do that. First and foremost, what the hell do you need to paint? A drip cloth or a newspaper? Lay that down first. I think that would be, choice number one. Set up a workspace for yourself. Put down like I said, like an old, I don't think I would use an old towel, but like an old cloth, something that's a little absorbent, and then newspaper for sure. I definitely put newspaper down when I do it, 2 layers, just in case something spills. And I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it in a room with carpet. I do not heed that advice. But insofar, I've luckily only spilled on newspaper or tile, which leads me to, what else are you going to need? Cheap stuff. 2 jars. JT uses 2 plastic cups. Very resourceful. Very eco-friendly in the sense that he's using the same 2 the same 2 recycled cups over and over again. These 2 little 8-ounce Dixie cups, opaque with the ridges. I use 2 black glass jars, because the old folklore tale about capturing souls in black glass. And I just think it's cool to have something like a black glass jar to have my water in. 2, for reasons. You want clean water at all times, and you want something that you can put your dirty brushes in quick. So you have 1 pot of water, and you dip into that to get paint off your brush, to soak your brush, to get paint out of it. It's pretty much just, it's your cleaning pot. And the other one is just water, as clean as you can keep it. If I'm painting, I'll, dip my brush in the in the dirty bin. I'll dip my brush in the dirty water, and then put it onto a paper towel and slowly just like I'm painting onto the paper towel, just painting away and away and away, letting the color and everything kind of soak out of it. And then you always want to make sure that you have some clean water for your brushes. You're going to want to soak, unless obviously you are doing the technique known as dry brushing, which in the name states what the brush will be while doing it. You'd want to have your brushes wet. Nobody told me that when I first started. Nobody was like, wet your brushes before you put them in paint. Nobody said that to me. And I have definitely spread that gospel. It's like, hey, just, if it's your first time, make sure you dip your brush in water. Oh boy, YouTube's gonna shut me down for that one. I bet. I don't know, maybe, we'll see. Like, probably not gonna happen, but hey, who knows? It's a podcast, anything can happen. All right, so palette. Now, I've discussed in prior episodes, I think, like the cost of Warhammer, that I was not fond of a wet palette. People have kind of bonked me on the head and said, well, this, like, use a professional wet palette and, you can save your paint for days. Like, your paint, not days, but a day or 2. And that your paint does not go to waste nearly as much as it does painting on a tile, or using a tile as a palette for your paint, like I do. So, I don't know, down the road, I will probably invest in a wet palette, and oh boy, you can guarantee that I will talk about it and perhaps do a podcast of me trying to use said wet palette. They also said that I'll talk about brushes a little bit. So the brushes I have beaten into the ground are the 00, which is what I was originally using to detail my Eldari combat patrol, and then the number 2 brush, which is what I was using for pretty much everything at a certain point. I got really good at using a brush of this size to apply paint, and then I would use the 00 for detailing. My 00, I have replaced, but my original is beyond repair. I burned through it in 4 months, putting detail on. Like I said, I would guess around at this point around 60, 70 minis. I've painted up. So yeah, and my friend said, well, if you had bought a number 2 Sable, that could have lasted you 3 years instead of 4 months. And I think, I don't know, like I said, that might be something worth investing in. And when I did the episode on evaluating the cost of Warhammer, I said, buy a cheaper brush set. I still stick by that. Only because getting into this hobby, getting into this hobby is like getting into this podcast. Either you're going to stick with it or you're not. No, getting into the 40K hobby, so much of it is painting, and it's a lot of fun if you have the patience and can set aside the time to do it. I've cut out a lot of other activities and hobbies to work on Warhammer, and quite frankly, it's not bothering me at all. I'm having a blast. I really enjoy working on these minis, for sure. And like I said, even at some point, I'm going to have to batch paint 20 Gene Stealers. So, yeah, I will actually be demoing some paint and taking pictures and doing all that for the podcast. Unfortunately, I haven't had much time in the prior week to do much painting, or the week before that, just between work and podcast and editing and whatnot. So, yeah, maybe this week after I get this podcast recorded, I can actually do some painting and take some pictures and hopefully add them with the podcast. If not, I'll put some pictures of some of the stuff I talk about that I've painted and built that I've got sitting here in front of me. So, like I said, back to the cost of, if we're going back to that episode of the podcast, back to the cost of Warhammer. I would still recommend buying like a starter set, and then, like I said, maybe when you get to that 4-month mark, and you've destroyed your number 2 brush, you're like, well, I hate this hobby, and then you're gonna try and sell your minis on eBay for what you think they're worth. Or worse yet, you'll be one of those jerks just trying to sell the box of your minis on eBay. Boy, I think there is a special ring in hell. If Dante's Divine Comedy was written today, I think there would be a very specific part of maybe just on the edge of the fifth ring, where people who sell boxes of things and not things on eBay. I think there's a very, very special place for them in the Divine Comedy. Let's put it like that. The Inferno, particularly. Anyways, back to what you will need. So the paint brushes. Let's still keep on that. I burned my number 2 or my 00 out. That forced me to finish up some paint jobs and then do 2 other paint jobs with a 0 and a 000. So the 000 is like eyeballs. I think this was what I did for like facial features on things. I painted like Gene Stealer tongues with this little bloody crevices on these pure strands I painted. I used it to paint some silver bolts on Benny, the Red Chaos Warrior. Pardon me, folks. Take a drink of water here. I've used it to put chain details into the appearance, the abhorrence. Because they have some very, very tiny like rib protrusions and some like big old warty calcifications on their back. And I painted all of those, I think, with a 000. I did think I did a really good job with these. And when I get to these acolytes, these 5 acolytes sitting in front of me, I really want to put a lot of detail into these. I mean, like probably at least a day into each model. I don't know. I may just end up basing them all with one color and just going down the rows just to try to keep some consistency. That's another thing with painting is just consistency. Obviously, you want your minis to have individuality, but anyways, back to brushes. Let's keep me on topic here. I'm just one person. The Citadel brush. I think it's a 1. I'm not exactly sure what this brush is. I don't know. It doesn't feel like the 2 that I use. Let's put it like that. If it's a 2, I'm not seeing any indicator on it. It just says starter brush. This brush is excellent for putting on decals. There's something about just the way the bristles are. There's something about the size of it. I've used this for putting on decals more than any other brush. I've kept it fairly clean of paint. I think I've only put paint on it once, and everything else I've ever used it for has been putting on decals. So using your transfer sheets, and oh boy, are those a pain in the butt, but man, are they worth it when you get them on the model. So a couple other brushes. I dry brush with a flat 8, and it's kind of a soft bristle, and I think that brush works really, really well for that. You can just go over the model where you need to. If you wanted to go down to like a flat brush that was like a 4, you could. I mean, like that would be a really good size for doing ornamental pieces, or if you just wanted to put just like a crazy amount of detail into. I would imagine something like a knight. I have not painted a knight. I don't want to sit here and pretend like I have. I would maybe use a 4, but for most of my dry brushing needs, I mean, there's so much dry brushing going on, like it's hard to get the flecks of gold out of the brush at this point. I've used a 4 a few times, mainly for staining like larger areas with technicals. And clearly, I'm going to have to go over, all the different, kinds of paints and that kind of stuff, and maybe talk a little bit about what's in my paint case. So, let's see. Brushes. I recommend a 2 and a 00, for sure. And then, I believe in a prior video, I'd put up a QR code for a set of 3 brushes on Amazon. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll put those up again. Because like I said, that's what I taught myself on, and they were decent. And like I said, I had to replace them, and then I think in a few months when these ones go, I may actually, instead of buying more minis, I will buy a nice brush. I'll come up with 100 other excuses, like, but I need this paint pot, or I need this technical, I need this to make this layer, I need this stain, I need to try it out. There's a ton of excuses that I'll probably come up with. Also, I just sawed the head off of a toothbrush and filed it down a little bit, and I used that to scoop paint onto my palette like a little spoon. It works really well. If it ever gets too dirty, you can just soak it in a shot glass full of rubbing alcohol overnight, and then just wipe it off with a paper towel in the morning, and then rinse it off really good, and you should be good to go. I have to clean it every 3 or 4 paints. It's not a huge issue, but I mean, paint can get backed up and gunk up on it. But like I said, it's just an old toothbrush that I cut the head off and essentially carved out like a little, scooper with it. Hemos are great tools. Hemostats. I went online and I bought a really cheap pair of pot metal 6-inch ones, and they are absolute garbage. But to be frank with you, there's nothing wrong with them. I haven't found any issue with the hemostats using them to as a tool for painting in Warhammer. I have a straight pair, and those I'll use for heads a lot. So if I'm trying to hold and grip a head, I will, or like an arm or a gun or something that I'm trying to put in a lot of detail to, and just holding it in my hand is not an option, or holding it, in 2 fingers. I will pinch it with the hemostats, put it in there, and then just press down on it ever so slightly, and then paint. With hemos, you don't want them to lock on the plastic because it could break the miniature from pressure. So another thing I recommend is I take painter's tape and I've put that over the clamps on the hemostats for 2 reasons. One is if they get dirty, you can just rip the painter's tape off and put more painter's tape over it really quickly. 2 is the grips, the metal grips on the hemos themselves are a lot less likely to damage your model with any pressure. I, insofar, have not damaged any model putting pressure on it from a hemostat. I have damaged it by trying to hold it between 2 fingers and gluing it or painting it. So, but using hemostats in the gluing and in the painting process, I mean, these things can certainly help you in the gluing process too. And I also use tweezers in both processes, but where I would use tweezers to put smaller parts and detail parts on vehicles or things like chains on like figures, I wouldn't use tweezers to hold the head of a model because it would just fly out of the grips. But while you are painting, I recommend that you keep a pair of, a decent pair of tweezers with you, so you can pull any, say like while you're priming, like if a piece of dust gets in there, and this will happen, or say the glue stretched out into a little stream because you took the arm off and then reset it, and a little strand of glue just is kind of just waving around, hanging there. You can take the tweezers, pinch it in, and then just kind of turn it a little, and then just pull it. Make sure you're not ripping, like a gigantic thread, and it's gonna, rip the whole arm at a joint or anything. But I mean, if it's just like a piece of dust, or just like a small like fleck of like an eyelash or something like that, like you can just easily use the tweezers to pull it off your model and save yourself a ton of headache. Or brushes, when brushes start to break down, occasionally they'll leave a bristle, and tweezers will just yoink, you can just get it off really quickly, where I would not recommend using something big and bulky like a hemostat to do that. Also with painting, I use the curved heads hemostats. I take a little piece of painter's tape, fold it over on itself, and this I actually do clamp down inside the hemostat. So what I use this for is on a model, if I'm painting a model with a weapon, say that's close to its chest, what I'll do is I'll put this in between the weapon and the model's chest, while I am painting the backside of the weapon, or for that matter, the chest of the mini that I'm painting. So I have found that using both curved hemostats and flat hemostats, although I suppose you could use a flat hemostat for the same purpose, but because I like to keep the blue painter's tape on the flat-headed one, I just constantly keep a piece of painter's tape crimped into the curved one. And like I said, hemostats have made my life just in so many arts and crafts projects just so much easier, especially when you're dealing with small parts and small things. All right, so yeah, you're gonna need 2 pots of water, a pallet, of which I use a tile from a hardware store. You need, if you're going to use a tile, you need a white tile that is gloss, like glass. You can't have it in any way porous or flat, because you will put something like Abaddon or Mephiston, anything from like Earthshade to Gnome, anything will just stain into anything porous. And with the gloss flat tile, I can literally just let any excess paint dry off, and then within, I'd say about 12 to 14 hours, I just take a razor blade and it comes right off into the trash. I have no issue at all. And then to make sure it's clean, I take a paper towel afterwards, and I kind of rub the paper towel on the surface and make sure that it's not sticking to anything, like that there's no like burr catching it from like paint globbed up on there. Like it's not tearing, it's not catching any fibers from the paper towel on the palette itself. And then I would take the and once I know that there's like no burr on, you flip it over and make sure that there's no color in it, and then put a little bit of, I would use 90 proof rubbing alcohol. You probably don't have to go that extreme. You could probably use just 70 proof. But just take a little bit of rubbing alcohol, put it on a paper towel, just a little bit. Like you just want to just barely like a moist spot on the towel, and then just wipe that over your palette a few times, and it'll pull up any excess paint, any grease, anything that's on there on the paper towel. It'll just come up. Dry wipe it, and you have a perfectly clean palette. I mean, you could use a paper plate if you want as a palette. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. But insofar as me using this 6x10 palette, it's absolutely awesome. I love it. It has served its purpose well. I've used it for many a paint job since I got it. I started off using the lid of a to-go box. I mean, what you use as your palette in the beginning is literally up to you. I wouldn't recommend dropping, any money more than the $4, that it cost me to get the tile. All right, so what's the next thing to talk about? Citadel paints. Now, Citadel Paints has a system. And for Warhammer, okay, everything is coded to this color system. Pardon me, I needed to... Mike got away from me there. Pardon me, I needed to grab my water. Oh, no, we're live, son. When it comes to podcasting, you gotta always be prepared for these moments. So I'll pull out the free guide to Citadel Color, made for miniatures here. And I'll explain why I use this system. Let's see here. Where am I looking for? I hit the microphone. Okay, right here in the center of the A Free Guide to Citadel Color Made for Miniatures, you'll see when you open it up, it's like when you buy like that big old box of or big old jar of jelly beans, and you got to figure out what all the flavors are. That's kind of what it looks like. It's a bit overwhelming, but Citadel has a page like this where you can go and kind of get an idea of what the paints look like. You are not going to know what the paints look like until you put them on a model. And if you are unsure about a certain thing and you don't want to buy the wrong thing, ask somebody, at the store that you're buying at if there's someone there who paints and if they'd use this color. Or ask online, reach out. I would definitely try and see, or if you see a color online, like on Instagram or something, ask that, like, well, hey, what shades of paint did you use? And through the Citadel paint system, I'm not saying I paint like Citadel tells you should paint, because I do not. I don't think that you need to buy the excessive amounts of paint as an introductory player. Like downloading the Citadel Paint app, looking at it and looking at a model and seeing every paint scheme that it asks you, like it's a lot, and it's overwhelming. And there's some things that you should know about that. First and foremost, when it comes to painting, I think that you should, when you're looking at your model, try to go with like a 3-color scheme. I think that's a good tip for beginners. But I hold on, I don't want to completely trail off on because I've been doing that a little bit too much tonight. Talking about the Citadel system and the Citadel colors. If you have a Games Workshop store or a place that sells these paints, you can get one of these guides or download it probably on the internet. I'll see if I can find one. No promises there. If not, I'll shoot a picture of it up on the screen so you'll have a general idea of what it looks like if you're watching on YouTube. But so when you open it up to the center of this guide, at the top it has the base paints. Below that it has the layer paints. Below that it has contrast paints. Below that it has shade paints. Below that it has the dry paints. And below that it has the technical paints. Here's where I think you should focus as a beginner. Base, layer, and then we're going to get into contrast shades and technicals. I almost never use dry. Maybe if I did, my models would look better. Oh, I don't know. But yeah, I think I have 2 dries, and I almost never use them. There's one I use for basing. Gosh, hold up. I got my kit right here. We can take a look. No, you know what? I'm not going to sit here and dig through a paint kit live. No, that's kind of painful for people to listen to. So anyways, but you can look at the bases and have a pretty good idea. Like bases and layers, you can use these. Not all of them are, not all layers can be interchanged with bases. Not all bases can be interchanged with layers. But a lot of them can be used as layers or bases. I don't think that's a leap for anyone in the hobby. But I will say that, like I said, there is just some times where you're just not going to know what a color looks like until you put it on a model. The other thing is how you prime a model will affect how your paint looks on a model too. So, I mean, if you're going for like a very dark, shadowy, look, you're gonna want to start with a Bad and Black as as your primer. Or there's Corax White, but I would use White Scar to base. I think it looks a lot better, and you can stain contrasts and technicals into it. I think a lot better. I like White Scar. I think Abaddon because Corvus is only available online. I don't know. I think Nurgling Green is another one that's only available online now. They used to be available in stores, but they no longer are for some weird reason. So I currently use Abaddon Black and White Scar. And then the other thing I like to base with is Lead Belcher. And Lead Belcher I like to use for anything metal. Anything that's going to be predominantly metal. I would recommend using Lead Belcher as your primer. So we went over, yeah, oh wow. So look at that. We went over primer right there. And we didn't we didn't have to get too far into the podcast at all. But yeah, those are the three that I would use for primer. I don't think you need to buy all three of those when you start. I think when you buy your first combat patrol, think about, how you want to paint them, as far as a color scheme goes. The Citadel system, why you should be using it in the beginning. You can walk in and say a color in the Citadel system. I can say Evil Sun Scarlet. I can say Mephiston Red. I can say Lauren Forest. I can say, Gehenna's Gold. I can say these things, and someone knows what I am talking about. And it makes it so much easier. Here is the hard part. There's not explicitly every shade or color in the Citadel paint system. For instance, I am not particularly thrilled with any of the shades of pink. I want something a little bit more lighter and a little bit more vibrant than anything that they offer. So it's just, yeah, I've got a lot of paints by them, but like one thing that I don't have is just a nice pink the way I want it to look on my models. So, do I add white to it, or am I finally at the point where I graduate into buying, another system's paint? I don't know. I haven't answered that question myself yet. But I do know how easy it is for me to walk into a store or call a store and say, I need this color. Do you have it? Maybe we shouldn't need things, people. Maybe we should really only want them. We can want them very badly. Maybe we should only want our paints very badly. So, call up your local GW or your local tabletop store and say that you'd really, really like some Sons of Forest Green if they have it. Be very, very polite about it, and remember there is a difference between wants and needs. Contrasts are almost like really dark stains, and they can go on a couple different ways depending on the color. Let's see. What do I have out of here? There's one or two that I've bought. Talisar Blue. I think that color is great for staining metal. So if you have Lead Belcher and you want to have like a metallic looking, really nice blue, I would go with Talisar Blue. But if I'm staining something, like a light blue, I would actually use a shade known as Terran Blue. This is so hard to describe and talk about. But if because there are things like shades and contrasts and technicals, and some technicals like they act completely can act completely different from other ones. So like contrast medium storm shield like astro granite does not look like its color. It almost always changes color when it dries, and um, it's yeah, astro granite's a weird one. Let me tell you, but uh, there's shading. Two things I would definitely say. What is it? Agrax Earthshade, and then Nolan Oil. I use those so often. The Agrax I use to give things a dirty look. So washing like the feet of my models, just to give it like a little bit of a grimy kind of boot. Like it's just been worn and weathered kind of look. I've also recently used it um, to make let's see, what did I use? Flayed one flesh. I painted some cloth the color of flayed one flesh, and then stained it with the Agrax Earthshade to make it look like leather, and it came out really really sick looking. I put just after the first application, I went back and just put a couple little more spots in some darker areas for shading, and it just looked absolutely amazing. It looks like people are just wearing worn uh, leather. It's a really cool one. Known oil, I have. Oh my gosh, I paint a lot of things gold, and known oil just makes gold look just so worn and smooth and tarnished, and it's just absolutely awesome. Um, I went back and dry brushed all kinds of like scars and scrapes and scratches in the paint jobs of my Wind Riders. And then I went and then I put a little known oil on them afterwards, and it gave them just such a worn, weathered look. And I think I also did their helmets and their golden boots with known oil as well, because just you'd be flying around with these chromed out helmets, getting all kinds of dirt and smoke and soot and just all kinds of garbage from the battlefield on it. So it gave it a really cool look. Um, I've also used known oil to add detail to faces. So when I batch painted the Gene Stealers, I used the known oil on the heads, and I believe these were painted white scar. And then I just slowly just applied a drop and then pushed it around the head of the model, and let it sink into the shadows and let it sink a little bit into the neck to give it like this, almost like dark, glistening, sinuous, bloody look. I also took a little bit and put it into the back of the of the pure strain, highlighted some pieces of the tail with it, and then put some on the legs. I think it added such a nice dirty effect. I had already used it on the hands and claws and feet, and then when I went back and did my extra detail at my friend's request, um, I ended up putting a lot more on the model, and most of the work I did was with known oil, just putting in. Like I said, it fills in the cracks nice and dark, and it really adds a lot of shadow to your model. But if you want something bright, it's not gonna make anything look bright. Known oil, Earthshade, they will dull anything bright. Um, but like I said, knowing how to use the shades and the contrasts, definitely a plus. Because you're gonna want to learn how to stain into a layer, so to speak, to add color. If you're painting with white, There's all kinds of cool techniques that you can do with your paint. Um, and white is also just a good base color because anything you paint over it will just almost automatically be vibrant. I've mentioned this, I think, in the past. When painting, I always grab a couple extra miniatures um, that I have laying around. Because I just a bit of a hoarder when it comes to things like board games. So I just have tons of minis. So I'll run to the closet and grab some that are just there, and I'll prime them up when I'm priming some minis, and they'll be my test subjects essentially. Um, they'll be the ones that, like, if I got a new pot of paint and I wanted to try out, for instance, there's so much gold and pink in flesh tones. There's a lot of gold, pink, and flesh tone painted just minis laying around because those are the things that I've tried to, paint and emulate in a mini a lot. So I've been doing much more with those colors. So obviously your test minis end up a lot more that color. So, anyways, Citadel, a commonly spoken language amongst painters, easy to use. It is not an end all. When you feel comfortable enough in this hobby to break away, or you just get frustrated, or you don't want to mix colors, whatever your excuse, buy a better pink. Or whatever shade it is that you're looking for. I know at some point I am going to want glow in the dark paint, and I have a feeling I'm going to be getting it sooner rather than later to test out. So we're going to see how that goes. Maybe with these Necromunda. Maybe maybe I'll try doing some glow in the dark detailing with them. I think that might be interesting. I think my Gene Stealer Colt is pretty much going to be a traditional red dog paint job. And by that I mean we're gonna prime it, and I hit it. I take a blue tack, put it on the bottom of the miniature because, like I said, all of my miniatures have been based before I decided to prime them. I'm not saying that's the right way or the wrong way. I'm just saying that's the way that I'm currently doing it. And like I said, I'll put the blue tack on a 2x4. Put it outside or in a very, 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 very well ventilated area. It has been raining like hell here in New England for the last few days, so it has been way too damp and moist. The river has risen. That is not even a metaphor. And it has been way too wet outside for me to spray paint to prime my minis. So currently, I cannot do that. So I mean, I could take an old shower curtain, fold it over into a big box, and spray paint in the basement. But still, with this humidity, I just don't know if I want to risk it for the sake of painting. Especially with these minis, you spend so much time building them, not to to mess that up at the first stage of painting at priming. I've got some miniatures with some gunky prime jobs, and luckily I was able to salvage them or to hide it. But yeah, that's not to say that I didn't have to teach myself how to prime well. Couple tips: once you have it on the 2x4, don't attempt to hold the 2x4 in your hand and prime, if that makes sense. Don't hold the 2x4 that you are priming. Put it on like a crate or a box or something. Elevate the 2x4 to a level where it's not going to hurt you to bend over and paint it, and where you can get out of the way of it quickly. Especially if you're outside, like wind can pick up at any minute, any second, whatever, and just blow paint back in your face or all over your neighbor's car. Anything horrible like that. Like, things can happen. So just always, don't let a mistake be a mistake. Just, you know what I mean? Just be cautious. Just like I was saying with the X-Acto knives in the last episode, always cut away. Always be safe while you're doing this hobby. So elevate the 2x4 and make sure that it's stable. It's not going to blow over or wobble or anything weird like that. And then I would stand away from it and, make sure that the wind's not going to, blow it back, or there's going to be anything to interfere with that. Like if you're doing it inside, like a AC vent or anything like that. Like I said, I still don't, unless you have an area set up specifically for this or are using an airbrush, I would not recommend priming indoors. So I have the 2x4. I have my minis blue tack to it. And then I think I have some pictures of some prior primes that I've done. And I'll see if I can find them and add them to the menagerie of pictures. So you want to stand about, I would say about I would hold the can about 8 to 12 inches away from the mini, and I would sweep across them. Like you don't spray directly at it, and don't let the first time you press the button, do not let it be aiming directly at a mini. That's some pro tips right there. And then just kind of go back, forth, done. Do not like do anything more than that. And then just let that paint, like if it's 5 minis, just go quack, 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 just like that. Back, forth, from 8 to 12 inches away. And just give it a nice, light, quick coat. Do not go crazy. Do not linger on the models. Do not be like, that one looks like it doesn't have enough, and spray it extra. Don't do that. Because of the next thing you're going to do. You're going to let your minis dry for 20 minutes. People say 15. I am going to tell you, let your minis dry for 20 minutes while you are priming them. And then go and then turn them around. Look at the backside, and it's going to be whatever color, or it's going to be that dark gray, whatever color the primer isn't. And then you kind of want to think about the lighting and the way that you're going to be looking at these minis. Like the way light would hit them when you're priming. So I would bring it down. I wouldn't spray directly at the back. I would bring it down at a bit of an angle so it hits the top of the mini's head, or whatever is at the top of your miniature. And I would do the same thing. I would go back, forth, and then I would just let it sit. And I would let it sit for 20 minutes before I would touch that can of paint again. Now, if you go back out and you're like, I didn't hit this one spot up on this mini, take all the other minis off and then hit that one spot on that one mini. If you have 2 minis that you need to hit a spot on, set them up, hit them up, and then just let them sit for another 20 minutes. You don't add an entire another layer of base because you didn't hit the side of a mini. Or you feel that you didn't wrap around the right way, or you didn't get underneath it enough or over it enough. Just lightly just go whack, just 2 quack, just 2 taps of the spray paint can, and then let it sit for another 20 minutes. And then after that, it's time to base, and it's time to layer, folks. There's a lot more about painting to talk about, and Lord knows I love to ramble. Let's see, what time are we at right now? All right, we're at 40 minutes. I'm gonna cut the podcast off. We talked about supplies needed. We talked a little bit about Citadel paints, and we started to get into techniques for priming, which I think is a good place to leave this off. So let's call this the 40K Parley, Book 1, Chapter 5, Part 1. painting supplies, painting. I don't know. That's up for debate. That is up for debate.